Well, ladies and gentlemen, I guess the emasculation of James Bond continues to some degree. We start off with a pretty hard Daniel Craig as a James Bond who sort of slowly whittled away to this bizarre husk of a movie that we came to with No Time to Die. But the Broccolis, the producers, the rights holders, or whatever you want to call it, of James Bond seem very intent on either virtue signalling and not doing anything, because that seemed to have been what they were doing actually during No Time to Die. They were like, oh, you know, no one's allowed to be called a Bond girl, that's sexist, and just literally loads of nonsense came out surrounding that film. But then the film came out, it wasn't especially, horrendous in terms of its agenda driving nonsense. It was more just bad in general because decisions seemed to be completely irrelevant to the plot. Anyway, now they've come out and suggested even more nonsense to do with James Bond, which I thought we would look at together. James Bond franchise producer says the future films will further explore super spy's emotional side. Bond is evolving, just as men are evolving. What does that even mean? Tell me, what does that mean? James Bond is evolving as men are evolving. Are you what's the implication here? What is the implication? Because the average Joe doesn't believe any of this nonsense. But let's take a look. We'll all enjoy this nonsense together. So according to the half-sibling production team, currently at the helm of the James Bond franchise, the focus placed on the iconic British super spy's more emotional and vulnerable sides in his last outing, No Time to Die, was less a one-off look into a seldom seen aspect of the character and more a preview of the franchise's future to come. Now, I chose this article because I really liked that point. Because I think it's quite a salient one. It's more specifically like, No Time to Die could have explored that vulnerability, the sort of emotion, all of that element, and been unique in that aspect. It could have been quite, I don't know, just different. Something outside of the status quo. But now, that is seemingly the start of the status quo. Which is sad. There are certain elements that James Bond, as a character, intrinsically should always have. And to differ from those too much means that the character is not quite the same character. It's not exactly rocket science. So to explore something here and there, a pitter-patter here and there, is interesting, it's compelling, but not all the time, because then you're just changing the character completely. So I thought that was a really valid point. But Barbara Broccoli and Michael G. Wilson, who have served as the overseers of the cinematic incarnation of Ian Fleming's fictional MI6 agent ever since their shared father and co-founding franchise producer Albert R. Cubby Broccoli passed in 1996, spoke for their vision of James Bond during a recent interview with Variety. What did they say? Asked by entertainment trade news outlet if they had yet to make any progress on finding Daniel Craig's successor for the franchise's eponymous role, the pair began by briefly touching upon the potential casting of Idris Elba, noting that while they love the Hobbs and Shaw star as an actor, they understood that accepting the job was a daunting commitment for any actor. So they say, the thing is, it's going to be a couple of years off, and when we cast Bond, it's a 10 to 12 year commitment, so he's probably thinking, do I really want that thing? Not everybody wants to do that. It was hard enough getting Daniel Craig to do it, and he notoriously stated on a press tour, like, I'd rather break my arms or break my wrist or something like that than shoot another Bond movie. And then he still came back, which I guess says a lot about, the amount of money they must have drove up to his doorstep. So we see this, and he was in his early 30s at the time about Daniel Craig. The brother-sister duo then admitted that only does the process of rolling out a new James Bond require a phenomenal level of dedication from whichever actor is lucky enough to land the role, but it's also a big investment for us too, as it's not just about casting an actor for a film, it's about a reinvention. We have to ask ourselves, where are we going to take it? And here we go. What do we want to do with the character? And then, once we figure that out, Who's the right person for that particular reinvention? Are you ready for a limp-wristed soy boy? Oh dear. Anyway, I'm going to leave that in because, you know, I'm sure some people find that offensive, but that's funny in some regards to me. However, it seems this next incarnation of Bond will be far from a complete reinvention of the character, as Variety writes that Broccoli confirmed to them that the humanizing of the once womanizing spy and the ensuring of more fulfilling meteor roles for the female stars of the franchise, during her and her brother's handling of the franchise, will continue in the next films. Now, Ana de Armas was amazing. Get her back. Definitely. Lashana Lynch was a pointless character. Right? Actually pointless. Completely pointless. Goes to go find James Bond. They escape. Like, they get kidnapped. Like, it's just complete nonsense of a film. Anyway, it's an evolution, asserted Broccoli, who, in addition to serving as a James Bond producer, is also the current director of the UK chapter of Time's Up. Bond is evolving just as men are evolving. I don't know who's evolving at a faster pace. Go away. It's such garbage. So Craig cracked Bond open emotionally. The films over his tenure were the first time we really connected the emotional arc. But it wasn't that good of an arc. Oh, just... And again, you know, Barbara Broccoli being the director of Time's Up. I mean, that thing's just a wash as well. You know, like, give Ana de Armas a proper role. Saying that Bond's evolving just as men are evolving. I mean, it's such virtue signaling nonsense. And it is an emasculation of Bond. Now, it's not to say that, obviously, right, if anyone clips this and goes, oh, just say that men can't be emotional. You're a moron. No one says that men can't be emotional at all. In fact, you know, I think, it's a travesty that male suicide rates are the highest that they are. And I think unequivocally, individuals, you know, the stigma around men having emotions, or at least displaying their emotions, is a contributing factor. Is it a sole factor? No, of course not. Men are relied upon to be the backbone of most people's societies. And I think unequivocally that and that amount of pressure would lead to that more so. So I'm not saying that, but when I say the emasculation of Bond, I mean, it's Bond as a character. It's Bond as an individual, an archetype. That is emasculation. We are seeing the emasculation of his character. Now, again, you can always have that come through in bits and pieces here and there. And we did have emotions of this character come through here and there during other Bonds, right? We saw it. We saw it come through. So we don't need him to be, crying into a handkerchief every single bloody movie, for goodness sake. Like, it's just not... I don't think men want to watch that. I mean, who's this then for? Is this for women? Sure, fill your boots, I guess. But you're going to lose a large portion of the audience for no reason. Anyway, I'd love to hear any and all of your thoughts. Drop them down below.